I don't know whether to say good evening or good afternoon, but whatever, I want to welcome you here to this Hoxie presentation of our own hometown astronaut. My name is Mary Ellen Welshon, and I am Superintendent of Schools for Hoxie Community Schools and Golden Plains Schools. And we are so thrilled today to have Nick here. And I want to tell you, I do understand that in our audience, we have students from Ray High School, Ray, Colorado High School, and we want to welcome you and tell you how happy we are you're here. I also have some other introductions. I would like to introduce to you this evening Nick's parents, Don and Bev Hague, if you'd please stand. Don and Bev, of course, as I said, are Nick's parents, and they are former Hoxie educators. Don served as the superintendent for Hoxie from 1989 to 2001, and Bev was an elementary teacher, and she taught third grade for 1 year, 2 years, something like that, and then went to middle school social studies. And she taught from 1990 to 2001. And we're just so grateful that you're both back. And we thank you for helping coordinate this visit. I really communicated with Nick through Bev. I said, Bev, you think this is all right? And Nick said, pretty much everything was okay, right? And I will say that many of us in this audience watched Nick grow up, or taught Nick, or had some connection with him. So it's been a marvelous day. We've been on the run and the go the whole day, but it's really been fun. And today we had about 700 people in this audience for the morning presentation. We had Golden Plains School and Hoxie Community Schools and some other people that came. Now, I also have a very special guest in the audience, and that is Jim Minix and his wife, Eileen. Please stand up. Jim is our House of Representative member. And they also have a hometown connection because Eileen, his wife, was Eileen Schiefreek and went to school here in Hoxie and graduated from Hoxie. So we're very pleased and happy that you're here. Guess I'm just kind of winging it tonight. So, you know, the thing is, we are proud to have Nick here because he will forever be one of our hometown heroes. You know, we have many, but this is, I think, the first astronaut we've ever had. So, so it is very humbling to have an astronaut of our own, and we're just really thrilled with that. And Carl, were you going to come do a special presentation this evening? Okay. That's right.
Mary Ellen's not following the script, but we're going to make do. Give me just a moment here. So my name is Carl Pratt, and I serve as the Executive Director of our Sheridan County Community Foundation and Economic Development Corporation, and I'm standing in for Kevin Schoendaler, the City Water Commissioner, and I'm here to present Nick with a special gift on behalf of the City of Hoxie. It's my distinct honor, on behalf of the city government and residents of the City of Hoxie, to welcome NASA astronaut Colonel Nick Hague back home to Hoxie. We're truly grateful that your travels, which have literally been out of this world, have brought you home to us today. It's a great honor to bestow upon you a key to the City of Hoxie in recognition of your heroism as a member of the Armed Forces on this Veterans Day. We'd also like to acknowledge all veterans today as well, and honor you and thank you for your unbelievable bravery and service to our nation and world as an astronaut aboard the International Space Station. Your community watched in awe as you traveled into space, entered through the hatch, and were welcomed aboard the International Space Station. We enjoyed the opportunity to visit with you from Earth and remain inspired by you and your work today. It is truly humbling to have an astronaut of our own, and we hope you will accept this small token of our admiration to you, as well as your family, for your incredible achievements. You are, as Mary Ellen said, forever a Hoxie hometown hero. Thank you.
Before I go any further, I do want to acknowledge all of the people that have helped us host and support this presentation, and that includes Sheridan County Community Foundation, Scott and Michelle Foote family, Foote Cattle Company and Oscars, the City of Hoxie, and the Sheridan County Commission for helping make this visit possible. Now, I would like to invite retired and longtime Hoxie High School English teacher Betty James to the podium to introduce our hometown hero, Colonel Tyler Nick Hague. Nick took Betty's picture along with the picture of the lady that helped him learn the Russian language into space. And one thing that Nick did say was that Betty helped shape him and lead him into the type of person he's become. And he said she taught this introverted engineer and helped him find his voice. So please welcome Betty James. No, I don't.
We have a lot of papers up here. I'll take that. Well, I can just hold it, I guess. Okay. Okay. How's that? Well, I'll call it good afternoon because it seems early to me. In the fall of 1992, when Nick was a junior at Hoxie High School, I had a new computer program called Illuminated Books and Manuscripts. I was barely competent with the fairly complicated software, and Nick was fascinated with it. He would come to my classroom after football practice and play around with it, and I would look over his shoulder and learn how to do it. He chose to illuminate a poem by creating links to various images, music, text, and audio, including a recording of himself reading the poem, which was called High Flight by John Gillespie McGee. It opened with these prophetic lines: "Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter's silvered wings." And it closed with these lines: "And while with silent, lifting mind I've trod the high untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God." Surely Nick's favorite poem was a harbinger of what was to come. After high school, Nick embarked on an education plan and a career that have brought him here today. He took his dreams of flying to the United States Air Force Academy, where he graduated with honors in astronautical engineering, and where he met his wife, Katie, who would travel with him in parallel careers, the couple adding 2 sons to the family along the way. Nick went on to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology for a master's degree in aeronautical and astronautical engineering. From MIT, his trajectory in the United States Air Force began its inevitable climb to his present position. He worked on advanced spacecraft technologies at Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. He attended the Air Force Test Pilot School in California and tested F-16, F-15, and T-38 aircraft. And in 2004, he deployed to Iraq. In 2006, Nick joined the Department of Astronautics faculty at the Air Force Academy, where he was an instructor of other young men and women with dreams of flying. Accepted into the astronaut program by NASA in 2013, Hague completed astronaut candidate training in July 2015. He was the first astronaut in his class to be assigned a mission to the International Space Station. In March 2019, a successful journey took him to space, where he served as flight engineer on the International Space Station for 7 months. Thus it was that Nick, at last, in his own high flight, slipped the surly bonds of earth, put out his hand, and touched the face of God. Please welcome Colonel Nick Hague.
Thank you very much. That's an amazing introduction. There's no one better to put together words than an English teacher that's had decades to hone her craft. Yeah. So I'd like to take a second. Miss James, you know, Mary Ellen said that I said that she helped this introvert, this engineer, find his voice. I think that, you know, that's what the high school experience, and thanks for driving all the way over here, guys. I hope this is going to be an awesome Friday night for you. That's what high school is about. It's about discovering yourself and figuring out what motivates you, and this is an amazing place to make that happen. Hoxie as a community is an amazing place to make that happen, and everybody gets touched by somebody along the way, and Miss James was one of those people that did that. You know, she's an amazing teacher, and that's why she's in the Teacher Hall of, you know, the Kansas Teachers Hall of Fame. So, thank you. Okay, so my only goal tonight is to share my experience with you. If I could, I'd take every one of you to space with me so that you could experience it, because it would change your life. I can't do that, though. So I'm going to try to change your life by showing you pictures and telling you stories, answering your questions, and hopefully you walk away a little bit with a little bit of bounce in your step tonight, because you know that there's just a lot of amazing things out there. There's a lot of questions we don't have answers to. There's a lot of questions we don't even know to ask. And that's what exploration's about. And every day, we're exploring space, trying to answer those questions and figure out the questions to ask. The first thing is to, yeah. So the elephant in the room, right? I'm home. So this is where I grew up. This is where I discovered what I wanted to do. Everybody's going to figure out something different that they want to do in life, but the community here gave me the time and the space to figure out and explore all the different things. I tried all kinds of athletic events, all kinds of clubs. I deep down figured out that I love to break things, figure out how they work, put them back together, and then later I discovered that that's an engineer. And I wanted to do that with things that involved space, because at night, and when you walk out of here, it's going to be dark, and you're going to be able to look up, and you're going to see an amazing night sky, and that just had me curious. So I'd look up at the night sky, curious about what was out there, and matching engineering to my curiosity for space is what set me on my path. And so it all started here. And I sat in this very auditorium almost 30 years ago. Doesn't seem like that long ago, but this is where it started. So thank you in general to the community for setting me on my way. So that dream was about to be fulfilled about 4 years ago. This is Alexei and I, Alexei Ovchinin, Russian cosmonaut. He's the commander for my crew, and we are finishing up exams in Star City, Russia, headed down to Baikonur Cosmodrome where our families are waiting, and it's launch day. We hop on a bus, we head over to the Cosmodrome. We're going to try on our launch suits, put on our space suits, and check them to make sure that they hold pressure and they're going to support us. And then we're getting ready to strap into a rocket that's going to propel us into space and fulfill that lifelong dream. At that point, over 40 years of anticipation and building towards launching into space and doing that exploration thing. So there we are on the Kazakh steppes on the other side of the globe in a Soyuz rocket, strapped into a Soyuz spacecraft, getting ready to launch into space. It's like being in a souped-up sports car and slamming on the accelerator and getting smashed into your seat, and it lasts for over 8 minutes. It just doesn't stop, shaking you along the way. So this is the fall of 2018. Alexei and I have been training for almost 2 years. We're 2 minutes into the mission, and as we're trying to jettison one of our external boosters, it collides with the rocket and causes the rocket to go out of control and disintegrate. As we're flying on top of it, going 4,000 miles an hour, 30 miles above the surface of the Earth. In that instant, the emergency escape system pulled us to safety. And then we continued to coast up to the edge of space and come back down, landing a couple hundred miles away from where we launched from. So you can learn a lot from something like that. A lot about yourself, a lot about life. The lesson for everybody in the room is, and many of you already know this, the younger people in the room, you still have to discover it, is you may think you have life figured out, but it's going to throw a curveball at you, and then you have to figure out what you're going to do with that curveball. And it's how you respond to that that ultimately defines you. So when I think about that, there's two images that really ring true to me. The first one is the picture here. Alexei and I are the two crew members. We land under a parachute a couple hundred miles from where we launched from. And by the time we landed, we were already in communication with the search and rescue crew that had been pre-positioned all along our route thousands of miles extending all the way from Kazakhstan to the Sea of Japan across Asia. There were Russian search and rescue forces there ready to help us if we ever needed that help. And that day we did. And within 10 minutes of us touching the ground, 3 pararescue jumpers jumped out of a plane, came down, had rolled over our capsule so that we could get out, opened the hatch, and pulled us out. And there we are sitting on the parachutes, waiting for the rest of the forces to show up, which took about 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so. And we're sitting there, and we're chatting. And one of those, the pararescue jumper that's closest to Alexei there, his father had done that same job for his entire career, his entire service in the Russian military, and his son had followed in his footsteps. And his son had finally got to do what the family had been preparing to do for all those years, because this is the first time something like this had happened in 35 years. We just don't normally have rockets blow up that are taking people to space. Or we try not to have them blow up. But it's this team that's vigilant there. We launch people into space on a Soyuz rocket once every 3 months. So once every 3 months, they have to spend weeks going to get into position, and then they wait, and then we launch, and then they're not needed. And so then they go away, and then they come back 3 months later, and they've been doing that for 35 years, and they're always there vigilant and ready to respond, because there's this team that I depend on, that the space program depends on to be there. And so this is emblematic of me, of this team that has to work, and some parts aren't as visible, but it's always there. We're part of this larger thing, and if there's a message that I hope rings home with everyone here, is that we don't accomplish things on our own. We accomplish them as a team, and this is a shining example of, it doesn't matter how well I was trained, I depended on those rescue jumpers to be there when I needed them, and they'd been training and doing their job, and together we had success. Together, I got home to my family that same day. This is the other image that is kind of etched in my mind. So this is about 6 hours after the abort. They had flown us back to the airport next to the Cosmodrome, and that's where my family was. And Katie's at the bottom of those stairs. So my wife, for those in the room that know, no surprise. For those that don't, so she is a Air Force colonel, retired, 25 years in the Air Force. She's deployed multiple times. She's been in the thick of it. She understands things. We get to the bottom I walk down those stairs, give her a huge hug. She puts her hand on my chest and she goes, "Don't worry, you're gonna get there. You'll get your turn." She's committed. She's committed not just to the mission of exploring space and understanding why it's so important, because it's so much bigger than any one person, but she's also committed to supporting me. And so you don't make it through life without the support of friends and family around you to help you through the tough times. And that's just the beginning of the tough times, right? How do you go through a near-death experience like that and process all of the emotions and things that we'd like to just put in a box and not deal with? You can only do that for so long. And so you have to talk with your family, and you talk about your feelings, and you talk with the kids and how they respond to something like this, because it's traumatic for everybody. And we spent time talking with each other and reaching out to the professional psychological support team at Johnson Space Center that's there. So you have to be willing to share and reach out and ask for help and understand that processing emotions is a normal thing. And I think more now than before, everybody that's gone through COVID isolation and all of the stress that's put on everybody understands that, hey, I can't bottle this stuff up, and it's okay to share. So we dealt with it. And then 5 months later, I'm strapping into the same type of rocket on the same launch pad. Interesting fact, that launch pad is the exact same launch pad that Yuri Gagarin launched into space. The first human to go into space launched from that same location. So there I am on a spring night in 2019 launching into space, and this time it goes flawless. Get to the station 6 hours later, the hatch opens, float through, give my crewmates a huge hug, and then get the chance to call down and tell Katie I love her. So the space station, it's huge. It's the size of a football field, so 100 yards from end to end, and those solar array wings, the big wings, those are just solar arrays soaking up the sun's energy and turning it into electricity for us to use up there. Those are the size of a jumbo jet's wingspan. Gigantic. It's really big. And you can't build something this big on the ground. We had to launch it in pieces, 100 different launches to get everything up there and then connect it, sometimes for the first time ever, on orbit. Inside, it has the volume, the habitable volume of a 6-bedroom home. And in that volume, it took us 10 years to build this, but in that volume, someone has been continually living and working in space for the last 21 plus years. Who in here's younger than 21 years old? So your whole life, there's been someone off of the planet Earth, working and living in space. That's your reality. The space station is enormous. And it's traveling through space at 17,500 miles an hour. That means it goes around the Earth once every 90 minutes. Looking out the window, I could watch myself come over the top of Vancouver, and I'd be in the Gulf of Mexico less than 10 minutes later. You can see so much out the window, and I'll show you some pictures here in a second. But why do we go to the effort to spend over $100 billion to construct this engineering marvel in space? We go to those great extents because up there I can do experiments where I can take gravity out of the picture. It becomes irrelevant because I can't see its effects. I'm going 17,500 miles an hour. So I'm going to explain this real quick to avoid the question later about whether the Earth is flat or round. So pay attention. Okay. So if I throw a ball across the room, it's going to start, and then gravity is going to cause it to come down, and it's going to hit the ground. Does everybody agree? Okay. Now let's say I shoot a cannon. The cannonball is going to arc. It's going to go a lot farther, right? But it's going to go, and eventually gravity is going to pull it down and it hits the ground. If I can just keep firing that cannonball faster, picture the arc as it's coming down, at some point that arc starts to match the curvature of the Earth. And so even though the cannonball is falling toward the ground curves away from the cannonball at the same rate. And so when the space station is flying around the Earth, it's the cannonball traveling 17,500 miles an hour, falling straight to the center of the Earth, but the Earth's curvature keeps turning away because I'm going so fast horizontally. That's how orbits work, proving the Earth is round. But up there, because everything's falling together, I can take gravity all away. The relative effect of gravity is gone, and everything floats together, and now I can do experiments over hours or days or months or years or decades where gravity is not the dominant force. And I'll get into some of the crazy stuff that we do up there. So that's the space station. That's the hardware. This is the software. Those are my crews. On the left-hand side, you've got Expedition 59. On the right-hand side, on the top, you've got Expedition 60, and then for the last week we were up there, the crew that was replacing me overlapped for about a week and a half, and then we all came home. So there were 9 of us up there for a short period of time. The one thing that you'll probably notice is that not everybody looks like everybody else, and we all have some different flags on our shoulders, because it's an international space station. On the left, Oleg Kononenko, Alexei Ovchinin, those are the Russian cosmonauts on the crew. David Saint-Jacques is the Canadian astronaut, and then Anne, Christina, and myself are the US astronauts. You might ask, what language do you speak up there? We speak both English and Russian. You have to learn both English and Russian in order to be up there. It's a requirement. At the end, so halfway through, and this is the way we've been rotating crews, you stay up there for 6 months, but halfway through, half the crew leaves, and then a new crew shows up and stays for 6 months. So you overlap crews about 3 months. And so when Oleg and Anne and David left us, then Luca from Italy, Sasha from Russia, and Drew from the US showed up to replace him. And that was our crew for another 3 months. And at the very end, I actually got to land. We launched with Christina. It was Alexei and Christina and myself on that second launch. Christina stayed. She's a rock star. She stayed on the station for an entire year. Instead of coming home, Hazal Mansouri, who you can see in the middle of that picture on the bottom, the first astronaut from the United Arab Emirates, was able to land with us. So he was up there for about a week and a half. So think about the challenge for him. Native Arabic speaker, has to learn English and Russian in order to work on the space station. Talk about daunting. But that's it. It's international. And I'll talk about teamwork, but it's the diversity. So I'll give you the punchline up front. It's the diversity in the team. It's the different perspective and the different experiences and the different backgrounds and the different cultures that we bring together that makes the team even stronger. And after you spend so much time in this tin can with them, you start to realize that we're all pretty much the same. And those differences are things that shouldn't be used to divide us and label us and put us into bins, but those differences are things that we should celebrate, because it's in those differences that the team gets stronger. Science, that's why we're up there. So we do lots and lots and lots of science experiments. So I've got some pictures up here talking about what we did. While I was up there, collectively the crew supported about 300 different experiments over a huge range of activities. The thing to keep in mind is I'm just an engineer. I'm not a scientist. So I had the privilege to be the eyes and the hands and the ears of the science teams on the ground and get them the data that they needed, that they might have been working a decade or their whole lifetime to get the answer to that one question, and I had the privilege to be able to collect the information and do the experiment and send it back down so that they could draw the conclusions. So you're really just an extension of that team on the ground. Growing food, upper left-hand corner, that's lettuce. So we're growing food, trying to figure out, how do I get plants to grow in space when water floats? How do I get water to the roots? How do I grow plants effectively inside a tin can where there's no direct sunlight? How do I drive its day-night cycle? I need to be able to grow food if I want to sustain people on the surface of the moon for a long time, or more importantly, on these really long missions to Mars. So we're figuring out some of those basic answers. In the upper right, there's this white box there that's got a cover on it. I couldn't take a picture with the cover off because the company, proprietary data, and there were all kinds of limits, but behind that is a 3D printer. Who knows about 3D printing? Yeah, so they had me unbox that and install that. New experiment, we're trying to figure out what this is going to do. They had me load it up with ink. There were 4 ink cartridges with this pink goo in there. It was designed to print human tissue. So the goo were cells, and it was trying to print tissue with the hopes of figuring out the technology so that we could print organs on orbit to be able to use in transplants on the ground. Because on orbit, everything floats. When I try to print them on the ground, the cell, when I'm printing tissue, until I get it built, it doesn't have enough integrity, enough strength to hold up against gravity, and it just breaks down. Or I have to put scaffolding around it, and that ends up getting in the way of building a good tissue. Up there, I can just put vessels down cell by cell and hopefully build an organ. We're still working on it. We're the guinea pig for a lot of stuff, so you can notice a lot of these pictures, we're holding probes to our heads or our necks or taking pictures. We're trying to figure out how space affects us. Down here in the lower left-hand corner, you can see me taking an ultrasound of my blood vessels in my throat, in my neck. On orbit, everything floats. Everything floats. You and I would be floating, but also everything inside of you and I would be floating. So what I had for lunch would be floating around inside my stomach. Think about that. My heart on the ground, right now my heart is working really hard fighting gravity, trying to push blood up into my head so I don't pass out. It doesn't have to work so hard because the blood just naturally wants to go to my feet, so it's built to push up. It doesn't know that I'm in space, so it keeps pushing up. And so that messes with things. We measured the blood flow in the veins, and actually there were times where I could squeeze my abdomen, and because gravity wasn't there, I could reverse the direction of the blood flow in my veins. We're still trying to figure out if that's a good thing. So we're doing all of this stuff. We're growing food. You see the lettuce up there, that kind of looks like food. I don't know if anybody'd be as appetizing to see the moss that I'm growing in the picture right below it, but that was an experiment to see if we could grow moss because maybe that's a better thing to eat in space. Science is why we're there. We're trying to figure out all these answers to understand more about us, our environment around us, and then also how to go further into space. Every month and a half, we have to resupply. We have to bring up new science experiments. We have to send the samples that we've frozen back down. We have to get fresh clothing, fresh food. Well, fresh is relative. We get food in packages, but more food. And it comes up in cargo vehicles, and those cargo vehicles are gigantic. It's like a school bus. And they come up and they sit right next to the space station about 30 feet away, and one of the awesome jobs the astronaut gets is to drive the robotic arm and reach out with this massive robotic arm and grab that vehicle. So the vehicle turns off all its control and it's just kind of floating next to the station. So I've got this Greyhound-sized bus sitting there floating next to this football field-sized space station, and I don't want them to hit each other. And so you have 90 seconds to make that happen. You spend 2 years, the better part of 2 years, training to perfect your ability to not make a mistake. And this is one of the most nerve-wracking things I did while I was on orbit, because they said go, and then the clock starts, and you know I can't make any mistakes. I've got one shot, and they're beaming this down on NASA TV so the whole world can watch if I make a mistake. Here you go. How many kids, I guess I shouldn't just keep it to kids, gamers in the room? You are training for this job. So don't ever let anybody tell you that no good comes from gaming. I got to do 3 spacewalks while I was up there. That's a chance to stretch your legs and go outside for a bit. So you put on a different spacesuit. This spacesuit is designed to support you with everything that you need to survive. It has a big backpack on it. The whole suit itself weighs about 300 pounds, but you're in space and it's weightless, so it just feels like your work clothes. And you train so much on the ground that it just feels comfortable and you know exactly how it's supporting you. But it's got all my oxygen that I need to breathe for the 8 hours that I might be sealed up inside there. It's got all the water that I need to cool myself. It has all the electricity I'm going to need, and it also has these little canisters that scrub out all of the carbon dioxide that I exhale so that I can continue to have fresh air to breathe. So that's it. I'm my own little satellite up there, self-contained. The only thing that really connects me back to the space station, on this left side you can see this braided steel cable. That's the cable that goes back to the airlock. So the first thing you do when you go out the hatch is you put down the anchor, and that's your cable, and you keep that tether attached the entire time you're up there. It's pretty amazing, because after a while, the spacesuit starts to just disappear because you're so comfortable in it, and it's just like putting on your work clothes and going outside and doing some light construction work. And as you're building and fixing things up there, you also get to look past it and look down at the Earth as it's gliding by and see snow-covered mountains and sand dunes and oceans, and it's the best view for a workplace I've ever had. I want to point out that we never go out alone. There's always two of us out there. I mentioned that team. And there's a lot of focus goes into the doing teamwork, and it goes to the people that are outside of the space station. But the most difficult job in a spacewalk is not on the outside, it's actually on the inside. So here's a photo of the four of us. So Ann and I had just finished the spacewalk. You can see us in our cooling garments. So this is what we wear underneath that spacesuit. It's full of tubing, and we circulate cold water through there to keep us from getting hot while we're inside the spacesuit. David and Christina were the people that suited us up. That's one of the most stressing things you do while you're up there, is you assemble the spacesuit around your crewmates. Their lives depend on you not making a mistake. And that's one of the most stressful jobs that you have while you're up there, is suiting your own crewmates to get ready to go outside. But we did it. We did it successfully. None of us had ever done a spacewalk before or been on the space station during a spacewalk, had any experience doing this other than the training we received on the ground. And so that points to an even bigger team. It's not the people on the outside doing the spacewalk. It also is the people on the inside of the space station that help suit them up. And it's not just the crew on orbit, but it's also the thousands of people on the ground that train us to do all of these activities, whether it's science or spacewalks or robotic operations. All of the things we need to do, there's huge teams that spread across the globe that provide us that training. And it's not just training, it's also the mission controls. So there's 5 mission controls up here. All day, every day, 24/7. You've got mission control in Houston, in Huntsville, Alabama. That's where all the science is run out of, is Huntsville for the US. I've got a mission control outside of Tokyo, Japan, in a town called Scuba. There's also a mission control in Germany that takes care of the European Space Agency. There's the Russian mission control that's outside of Moscow, in the suburbs of Moscow. There's the Canadian mission control that helps support the robotic arm operations up in Montreal, Canada. So it's all over the globe, helping support us all day, every day. In total, there's 7 people on board the space station, living and working right now. There's a team of about 100,000 people spread across the globe, working day in and day out to make that possible for them to live and work in space. It's a team sport, just like anything we do in life. We don't do it alone, we do it as part of something larger than ourselves. I talked a lot about work. Let's talk about life. So this is us, long week, it's Friday night, so what are we gonna do? Let's hang out at the dinner table and trade stories and listen to music and celebrate those differences that I talked about. So we put on our comfy clothes. This is taco night. That's a best approximation at a taco with what we had in the pantry. I think that's salami that's been sliced, and it's probably some type of hot sauce that's glue to make sure the salami doesn't float away, and then tortillas. We have lots of tortillas on orbit because bread spoils, but tortillas you can keep for quite a while. So that's our bread up there, is tortillas. But we get around the table and we share each other's favorite music, and we listen to each other's music, and we talk to each other about what's going on in our families' lives, who's had a dance recital, who's had a Christmas concert, who's traveling where, who had a birthday, did someone in the family have someone pass away? All of that stuff we share. And that's where you start to realize that even as different as we all might look, we're all pretty similar. And there's something magic that happens around the table as you commune up there. You start to develop this sense that, you know, I depend on you for my life, and we're getting to know each other so well. You become brothers and sisters up there. So you launch as colleagues and you come back as something more. A huge part of living in space is trying to stay fit, because space is unfriendly. We have not evolved to live in weightlessness. So we have to do everything we can to implement countermeasures to that. So we work out 2.5 hours a day, every day. Half of that is cardiovascular, either running on a treadmill or riding a stationary bike, and the other half is lifting weights. So on the left-half side, you can see running on a treadmill. That's a treadmill that you could go to any gym. You could buy a treadmill like that for your house. The only difference is on orbit, I float, so in order to run on the treadmill, I have to wear gigantic rubber bands that pull me down to the treadmill. And then I run. If I lift my legs up, then I float over the top of the treadmill. The bike, it's really just a stationary bike. The only modification is if you look at that picture close enough, there's no seat. In orbit, I don't need a seat because I float, so I can just pedal. I have a belt around my waist, but that's really to keep me from rotating forward and smacking on the deck. Weightlifting, lifting weights and weightlessness, sounds easy. It's not. So they devised a system where there's 2 gigantic metal cylinders with a plunger in each cylinder, and that plunger pulls against a vacuum of that cylinder, and that's how I generate the resistance I need. And then I do all the normal weightlifting routines that you do here on the ground, squats and deadlifts and bench press, all of that, so that I stay strong. And all of this works because I landed stronger and fitter than I launched. I took a test right before I launched. Then I took a test 7 days after I landed. And in every regard, I was stronger and healthier after coming back from a cardiovascular and a muscular way than when I launched. So we've figured some things out in the few decades that we've been living and working in space. But that should tell you that working out is important. And so what I emphasize to the high schoolers is developing a lifetime healthy habit of moving and stressing your body is important. Find a way to work that into your approach to your everyday life. Other aspects of living in space: friendly inter-service rivalry. I was up there with Colonel Drew Morgan. He's a West Point graduate. I was able to watch a little bit of the football game and rub it in when we beat them. So even the inter-service rivalry extends off the surface of the earth. Alexei in the middle at the top, he's on a video conference, and so every weekend we would be able to talk to our families over a video chat and see how they were doing. And so here's him talking to Sveta and the kids and seeing how life is going on down at the earth. It's important to stay connected. Upper right, haircuts. You gotta be everything up there, even the barber. That is the only activity that we receive 0 training on. And it shows. My first haircut, Alexei just, put on a number 2 and I was like, something got lost in translation, my friend. Birthdays, all those significant life events, anniversaries, all of that happens and we celebrate that, and it's important to continue to celebrate it because life continues on the ground and life continues on orbit, and you have to find a way to celebrate those milestones. But the singular, most breathtaking, moving thing that I could do would be to float over to the cupola window. So it's the big window that looks down toward the earth. It's got the 6 different sides to it and the big circular window, and just look at that and marvel at what you could see from that vantage point. That's just looking out the window. That's how much you can see. You can see the entire Nile River. That's over 1,000 miles. Just look in one direction, I can see 1,000 miles. I can see the entire Nile River, I can see the Nile Delta, Egypt, I can see all of the Middle East in just one view. And I'm only 250 miles above the surface of the earth. The moon is 250,000 miles away from the earth. I'm just 250 miles. But I can see so much. The one thing you don't see a lot of, I don't see a lot of borders. Where does Egypt start and stop? Where's Sudan? You see geography, you see the earth speaking to you, you don't see the artificial boundaries that we create between different countries. I said we're going 17,500 miles an hour around the earth, which means I go around the earth once every 90 minutes. That means I have a sunrise or sunset once every 45 minutes. So I'm constantly switching between day and night. And if you sit in that cupola when it's daytime, the sun is the heat. You can feel the heat, and it's bright, and your eyes are pinched down because it's just so bright. And then the sun will disappear almost in a flash. And then it's dark, but your eyes still haven't adjusted. So really all you see are like the brightest stars. And then you sit there for a minute or so, and your eyes start to open up, and you start to see more stars. And then eventually you're seeing constellations, and you wait a few more minutes, and now I'm starting to see like very clearly the Milky Way, and I see all that cloudiness, and then you wait another 2 or 3 minutes, and you just keep seeing more and more. And it gives you this impression of the universe kind of being unfolded to you in its depth, where I'm slowly seeing deeper and deeper into the universe, and it just doesn't stop. And I've tried like crazy to take a photo that captured all of that stuff, and you can't do it. So this is the best I've got, and it's not good, because there's so much stuff out there. And then you look down at the surface of the earth, just there in the image, and you can see the glow of the atmosphere, and you think about where we live in that atmosphere, on the surface of this sphere, and just how small that is compared at the exact same time with how deep the universe is. And you start to get this sense of how small we are, how fragile things are, how connected we are on this planet. You see amazing things, these ghosts that dance around, the northern and southern lights as the radiation pours in from the sun and gets redirected by our magnetic fields that protect us on a daily basis, but then produce these spectacular light shows on the poles. You see the power of Mother Nature. This is Hurricane Dorian, a Cat 5 hurricane, and it just looks spectacular. You can fly over I took that picture as we were flying over the eye of the hurricane. You can see all the way down and almost see blue ocean in the eye of the hurricane. And It doesn't even seem to be moving. We're going so fast over the top that this looks just like this stationary, fluffy, almost like pancake sitting on the atmosphere. And it looks, I mean, you just sit there and stare at it, it's mesmerizing, but you know that underneath that hurricane, it is just wreaking devastation for anything that's in its path. You can also get a sense for the power of the human civilization to change the earth. So here's a picture of South America, and you can see the different colors of green, and those lighter shades of green are where we've chopped down forests, and we've planted fields. And then you think back, wow, a couple pictures ago, I was able to see the entire Nile River stretching out for 1,000 kilometers, and then you get a sense of scale for how much deforestation is taking place here, and the capacity for humans to change the world around us. Or you see home. So that's Kansas. I'll give you a second to try to figure out where we're at on that. I just want you to know it took me the better part of 2 months to find Hoxie and take a picture of Hoxie from space. But I did it. So we'll start easy. What's that? That's Wichita. Kansas City. Does anybody see Kansas City? Yep, up in the upper corner. What do you think is above Kansas City, kind of towards the top? Omaha. So where does that put us? Somewhere out here. Not a lot of distinguishing features out here. I looked really hard for the intersection of Highway 23 and 24. You cannot see it with your naked eye. It's also very difficult, if not impossible, to see the Great Wall of China with your naked eye. So it's hard. But there it is. So I took that with a Nikon D5 for any people that know their cameras, and I just had a normal 800 millimeter zoom lens on there. So this is stuff you can go down to the store and buy. Just pointed out the window, took the photo. I was pretty impressed because I was finding this. Remember, I'm flying from Vancouver all the way to the Gulf in like 6 minutes, going 5 miles a second, and I was able to find it. It took me a long time, but I did it. Never got old, but time flies. And 203 days on the space station flew by. 7 months, it's almost like an entire school year I spent on the space station, and it's over. And so it's time to come home. And so almost a year to the day, I landed within spitting distance of where I landed during my failed launch attempt in the steppes of Kazakhstan on a beautiful fall afternoon underneath a parachute. And they crack us out of the capsule. There's more people waiting this time. They were expecting us to be there. They hand me a satellite phone, and we get to call our families. And I'm sitting in this chair in Kazakhstan on the opposite side of the earth, and I'm able to tell my wife, I'm home. Because now the earth feels like home. Now I feel I have stewardship, not just of where I'm from, but of the planet. And that's why I wish I could take every one of you to space. Because we're all connected. You might think that you live in Hoxie or Ray and you are as far away from the world as possible and you're not connected and you have very little ability to have a huge impact on the world around you, but you couldn't be more wrong. You're connected. Every one of us can have a huge impact. That's the last picture I took. I was like, I got to take a picture. This is my last day here. I got to get inside that hatch and close it and come home. I need one last picture, so that was taken just minutes before I hopped in the Soyuz to come back. And I look at that, and for me, it's the symbol of opportunity. It's a symbol of what can happen. The sun's coming up, and it's time to see what we can do right now on Wednesday morning, really early, or Tuesday evening, depending on how you're counting. We're getting ready to launch one of the largest rockets we've ever launched into space, the Artemis 1 rocket, and that's going to go around the moon. It's not going to have a crew this time. We're testing out all the equipment so that in a couple years we can send people to the moon and learn what we need to learn in the moon, on the surface of the moon, around the moon, so that we can go to Mars. So who's under 21 in this room? My team of 100,000 people around the globe are doing what we're doing right now so that someone your age is able to fly to Mars and step foot on it. And I sat right here in this auditorium 30 years ago dreaming about doing that. So there's no reason that you can't dream about doing that and make it real. I did it. You can do it. And I hope you do. All right. So I've got a video. I'm going to show the video because no matter how well I try to describe water dancing in front of you and playing with it on orbit, it's always easier just to show a video. So this is a little summary of what it's like to live and work in space. And then after that, I think we got time for questions. I hope there's some good questions. I'll try to have good answers, and then we'll just see where we go from there.
We accept the risks because we believe in what we are doing. This is an important mission. We are trying to open humanity's eyes, discover new things, make life better on the ground, and push further into the universe.
What's next? Artemis.
It's a pretty awesome time to be involved with the space business because there's lots of cool stuff going on, and there's a lot of room on our teams for everybody to get involved. So if you're interested, let me know. All right, so I want to answer questions. I think we've got time, or at least I've got everybody hostage for a little bit.
I got a couple questions.
Fire away.
Okay, first of all, can everybody hear me?
We got you.
I project pretty good. Anyway, when you did the arm, was that you doing it, or is that somebody else and you were taking a video of it? The arm reaching out for the supply?
I reached out and grabbed it.
That was you?
Yeah. I thought so too. I got to tell you though, my heart was thumping out my chest.
Second question I had, it's kind of a question. When you're, oh, I think I lost it. Hello? Technical difficulty. All right.
You got it.
When you're in weightlessness and you're doing your duties and everything inside, your breathing and your circulation, everything on Earth, gravity affects that. Could you tell a distinct difference when you were in there doing that? I mean, could you breathe easier, for example? Could you,
Well, life's easier when you float through it, right? So I wasn't out of breath. I didn't have to walk upstairs. I didn't have to do anything. So that's why I had to work out 2.5 hours a day to counteract the fact that I was just floating the rest of the time. And it took a while for the body to adjust to it. When I got on the treadmill, we hook up to a heart monitor, and I got up there for the first time, and Ann had been there for a while. She'd been up there 3 months or so, and so she was kind of indoctrinating me on this is how you get into the treadmill and all that. I hooked myself up to the heart monitor, and she's like, "Is your heart rate normally 30?" And I was like, "No." She's like, "Okay." So you adapt to it really quickly. And that was one of the surprising aspects of all of this, was just how adaptable a middle-aged guy is. I would have thought that, I'm kind of set in my ways and nothing's going to change. So then you can start to say, well, if you work out a lot, sure, you're going to get in shape. But there were other changes, like inside your head and how your mind is processing the world around you, that fundamentally change, that you don't even think about. But then when you see that change happen inside yourself, you realize that we are infinitely adaptable to the environment around us. And so whatever we expose ourselves to is going to create who we are. So in some instance, you are what you eat, right?
Just a comment. My we've been to the Cosmosphere in Hutchinson.
It's an amazing place.
And what I noticed tonight is the technology and the equipment compared to what they first went up to the moon in is just, and they have replicas of the inside the cockpits and all the instrumentation, and I mean, we've gone
Light years. I got more technology in this device than they had in like the entire Apollo space program.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the challenges are still as daunting. How do I go to another planetary body and keep people alive in an environment that is constantly trying to kill them? That's the challenge. Yeah. Thank you for the questions. I appreciate it. Yes, sir. Right here with your hand up.
What landmarks, man-made, could you see from space?
Man-made landmarks from space. So I showed you a picture where I could see cities, but if the sun was right, I couldn't even see the cities. For the most part, I couldn't see man-made landmarks from space. If I took a picture of New York, I could see a city. I can see Central Park, You can kind of see Central Park with the naked eye because it sticks out like this green spot in the middle of New York City, but it's really difficult. The stuff you can really see are like the pictures of South America. I could see the deforestation. I could see all the burning that was happening because I could see the smoke as they're kind of clearing out trees. So you could see things like that. So you could see the impact, but you don't see people. You don't see roads. You don't see cars unless you pull out a camera and zoom in real tight. It's a good question. Yes, ma'am.
How long does the spacesuit take to put on?
The spacesuit for a spacewalk takes about 45 minutes to an hour to put on, and it takes somebody to help you put it on. And then once you're inside of it, we close it, and you're breathing 100% oxygen. But inside my body, I have lots of nitrogen. And when I go out the hatch, I have to lower the pressure in the suit, otherwise it'd be too inflated for me to move it. So we lower that pressure. So it's like I'm working on the top of Mount Everest. So if I'm going to work that high, I have to breathe 100% oxygen, but I also have to get rid of all that nitrogen in my system, otherwise it makes bubbles inside my blood. And I don't want those bubbles of nitrogen to go into my brain because it could cause a stroke, or I don't want those bubbles to go in my joints. So we have to get all that out. So I have to sit there for almost 4 hours breathing to get rid of all that nitrogen. And then I'm ready to go out. And I do a 7-hour spacewalk, and then I come. It takes about an hour to take it off. So I'm in that suit for about 12 hours. I'm in that suit, and the only thing I have is all the oxygen I need to breathe, and I have a small drink bag with about 32 ounces of water. And doing a spacewalk is almost like running a marathon. So that's how physically tiring it is. So when you get done, the first thing you want is have a big meal. There we go. Good question. Yes, on the end.
Do you ever miss space, and would you rather, do you prefer there or here?
Do I miss it? Yeah. I miss that view, that perspective. What I don't miss is being away from my family. I wish I could take my family with me up there so they could share in it. The one thing that's better than looking out the cupola window at the Earth is looking out the cupola window with someone next to you. So being able to share that. So I'd rather be with my family, and I'd love to take them up there so they could experience it. I would love to go back. I am in training to be assigned. I just don't have an assignment yet. Maybe if I'm lucky, I'll get another assignment. We'll see. Yes?
How long did it take you to get used to gravity again?
To readapt to the Earth. You saw me in those pictures with all the science experiments, and you saw all the poking and prodding. So one of the fun things the scientists like to do is they set up this tent right next to the capsule. And so I sit in that chair for maybe 20 minutes to kind of reacclimate. I don't really stress myself. I make a phone call home, and then they take me from there over to this tent, and then they have me run an obstacle course. And I have no sense of balance, and they're having me try to walk heel to toe with my eyes closed, and I'm falling over, and you're also doing it in the middle of the steppe, which is like the most uneven ground. It's like walking through a tilled field, nothing level about it. And I had no balance. 24 hours later, I was walking through an airport terminal. So it happens fast. Your body remembers and it kind of snaps back. It took me longer to adapt to space than it did to readapt back to Earth. So it'll be interesting for me, if I do get lucky and get another flight, do I adapt to space faster? The crew that I was with that had flown before say yes, but you never know until you try it yourself. It's a great question. Yes, ma'am, right here.
How big are the corridors in it?
Just a
Oh,
second.
sorry.
How far is the view up there?
How far is the view up there? So I can see about 1,500 miles this way and 1,500 miles that way, which means I can almost see the entire United States. When I go down into the window and I fly over the middle of the United States, I can almost see the whole thing. Life-changing. Yes, sir.
How big are the corridors on the ISS?
How big are the
Corridors.
inside?
Yes.
The modules themselves are like soda cans. They're thin aluminum, thinner than I'd like them to be, but good enough. And they're pressurized, so they're rigid, and they have shielding on the outside so that if any debris hits it, it doesn't puncture. And on the inside, then we add these racks of equipment, and we add it to the overhead and the deck. We're using Navy terms here. So overhead and the deck and the port and the starboard, and that creates this space in the middle where there's a kind of a square column that we live in, and all the equipment's around us. And so if I'm in that square column and I put my feet on the ground and I put my hand over my head like this, I can touch from one side to the other. And it's about the same, it's a square. So it's not very big this way. Lengthwise, one of those modules is maybe 20 feet. But on the inside, collectively, it's a 6-bedroom house. And that may not seem like a lot, but think about this room. Where are we all right now? We're in the bottom quarter of this room. All of this volume above us is wasted space. On the space station, we use it all. We work on the ceiling and the walls. We have cables going everywhere. We store cargo in the middle of it all. We could fit a lot of stuff in here if we just used all the volume. Okay, someone, you got to scream because you don't have a microphone. Go for it.
What do you do for entertainment up there?
Entertainment, that's a great question, because you need entertainment. I was on that treadmill. I don't know if you noticed, so you're kind of pointed down, and what you're staring at on that treadmill is this flat panel of nothing. It's just a plastic panel, and you're about 2 feet away from it. So I was on that treadmill for almost 45 minutes every other day for 7 months. It was critical to put an iPad up there. And so I watched all kinds of TV. I watched The Office from start to finish. I watched Parks and Recreation from start to finish. All kinds of stuff. So they load that stuff up to us. We also, you saw I had a picture of a football game. We have the ability to get one channel of live TV. It goes on the ground, gets beamed up through a series of satellites that are out 20,000 miles from the Earth, and then beamed back down to the space station because those satellites are fixed in space and we're orbiting underneath it, but I can get live TV. The only problem is my remote control is in Houston in mission control. So if I want to change the channel, I have to call down and say, Houston, can you please change the channel for me? Yes, ma'am.
You're going so fast and nothing in your way, so you wouldn't be walking into it, right? Okay, so what do you do with like a trash? You put in a container and throw up in a space. Never hit that one again.
You saw the cargo vehicle that I reached out and I grabbed? Those cargo vehicles, we will stuff full of our trash. And some cargo vehicles come all the way down. We put our science experiments in those and they land on the ground. Other cargo vehicles are designed to burn up when they re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, so we cram all of our trash in there and then it burns up when it's coming in. Now, but I'm going to answer the first part of your question. So you said, we're going really fast and we want to make sure we don't hit stuff, but there's stuff up there, so we have to move the space station. A couple of years ago, the Russians conducted a weapons test and blew up a satellite, and it left all kinds of chunks of debris up there. And even today, not today, but within this last week, we moved the space station to get out of the way of a piece of that junk because it's traveling at 5 miles a second. It doesn't have to be very big to cause us a problem. And so we move the space station. And so I'm in the Space Force. Part of the Space Force, I'm a Space Force assigned to NASA, and that's where I do my work, but other parts of the Space Force track all of that debris, and then they call us and they say, you need to be concerned. We think there's a high chance that this could hit, and if they think it's a high chance and it gets close enough, then we move the space station out of the way.
So a space station won't have a sensor, and you're going to pass something in your way.
The space station doesn't have an ability to see something and move out of the way. At those speeds, the space station, by the time I saw it, there'd be nothing I can do about it. So we rely on a network of sensors around the entire globe on the ground, looking up to track everything that's up there, to predict when it's going to be there so I can move, because I really need to move about an hour before it's going to hit me. And that means it's on the opposite side of the Earth for me. Yeah, it's a complicated problem.
Do you feel the effects of radiation while you're up there?
Effects of radiation. Who's had an X-ray? Did you feel anything? No. So radiation is really tough to quantify. But there's a unique ability in space because we're not protected by the atmosphere. You get exposed to more radiation. And so at night, when I get in my crew quarters, small little closet, barely big enough for me to fit, but it's big enough for me to sleep in, I'd close the doors, I'd turn out the lights, and I'd fall asleep. But right before I'd fall asleep, it's completely black. It's one of the only times up there where everything's completely dark. I'd see flashes every now and then, a starburst or a streak of light, and it was radiation hitting my retina and my optic nerve and causing that streak of light to show up in my mind. And so I could see the effect of radiation. I couldn't feel it, but I was ever present that I'm up here in an environment that's exposing me to radiation, and I'd see it before I fell asleep. And I'd chuckle to myself, because, I'm falling asleep in space, and that's pretty cool. But then, who knows what that's going to do to me long term, but hey, I'm here. Yes, sir.
Are there any physical requirements to become an astronaut?
Physical requirements. They're pretty big. You got to be healthy. So what do you have to do to be healthy? Work out. Pretty obvious. There's a requirement to have a master's degree. Do you know what a master's degree is? College. Got to go to college and then do a little extra college after you're done with college. And so you get a master's degree, but it's got to be in a technical field, so it's got to be a STEM field. Does everybody understand STEM? Science, technology, engineering, math? Who loves math? Who loves to do equations and solve X equals? Yeah. Not seeing a lot of hands from the high schoolers. It'll get better. So that is essentially the only requirements. You have to fit into the equipment, but we can fit everybody from a 5-foot tall person to a 6'4" tall person, and we're designing our new spacesuits and our new equipment to fit an even larger spectrum of people so that more people from the general population have the potential to become an astronaut. So there's not many barriers. So what do you need to do to become an astronaut? Every astronaut did something else before becoming an astronaut. They all had a career in something else that they loved to do, and they did it really well, and then they applied to become an astronaut. So that's what you have to figure out is, what are you passionate about? What are you going to go do, and what are you going to be amazing at? What team are you going to join and do great things? And then if you want to, apply to be an astronaut. That's the requirements. Thanks for the question. Okay. Go for it.
Is there a reason we launch and land in Kazakhstan rather than anywhere else in the world?
At the time that I was launching, we didn't have the capability in the United States to launch people to the space station. SpaceX still hadn't developed the Crew Dragon that we're using now to get crews back and forth to the space station. So that was the only ride. We had retired the space shuttle, and the Soyuz launching out of Kazakhstan, out of Baikonur, was the only way to get to space. Today it's different. But what's changed is, just because we have our only way to get to space, we have more than one way, doesn't mean I'm only launching U.S. astronauts out of the U.S. So now I'm launching international crews from both locations. And we're working on more vehicles. So there's a Boeing Starliner spacecraft that's supposed to do a test launch with the crew this next year. That's going to take people to space. And then the Artemis rocket that I was talking about, that's going to take people to space as well once we get this first test launch out of the way. So if you want to watch a launch, now's a great time, because now you can actually go to Florida and watch people launch into space. For about 10 years, you couldn't do that. Now you can. Okay. Yes, ma'am, in the black.
Okay, so the first one's really weird. But you know,
I like weird questions.
so you spent about like 8 hours in that suit, right?
Yeah.
When you have to relieve yourself, how do you? And then the second question also, what was your favorite food to eat up there?
All related. Your questions. I saw the connection in your mind of how those were related. So it's a brave question to ask. We're in a spacesuit for 12 hours. What do you do when you have to take a pee? You use the diaper. And actually, it's not a diaper. We have improved over time. It used to be a diaper when I first showed up to NASA, and it was like, no kidding, it had the sticky tabs, and you put it on just like a diaper. We use pull-ups now, so we're getting better. And then food. So food up there is very similar to what the military does to provide food to its deployed forces. So it's shelf stable. Some of it's been sealed and irradiated so nothing will grow, and it's good for a couple years, and you think like meats and things like that, and then we just warm them up when they get up there. Or there's other things that are dehydrated, so we add hot water to them and we let them sit for a little bit, and then they reconstitute, and it's pretty close to what you'd have on the ground. There's about 200 different menu items that we have to choose from up there, so boredom, you don't get tired of the same foods all the time. There's a lot to eat. One of the tricks, one of the problems is eating enough. Remember I said everything floats. So one of the cues your body uses to sense fullness is food touching the top of your stomach. But if the food is floating around in your stomach, it's constantly touching the top of your stomach. And so I'd eat just a little bit of food and then feel full. And losing weight on orbit is not a good thing because you lose it in equal proportions. So if I lose 3 pounds, I'm losing 1 pound of muscle, 1 pound of fat. Those two, okay, maybe you can counteract those, and we've got countermeasures. I also lose 1 pound of bone. So it's in that proportion, so you don't want to lose bone. So I've got to stay the same weight. So I tracked all my food intake. And we work with the nutrition team on the ground, and I have this complicated logger, and you barcode everything in, and they know exactly what you're eating, and they can track your calories, and if you're not getting enough, then they tell you. And then we weigh ourselves. Each month we'd weigh ourselves. How do you, there you go. Somebody is thinking, how do you weigh yourself in space? Every force, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So there's this, if you get, who's in physics in high school? What? Okay. So if I have a spring, and I know the spring constant, and I hook a mass to it, that would be me, and I oscillate that spring, so I push myself into that spring, and then I sit there and I let it vibrate. The frequency that I vibrate is related to the mass. So if I know the spring constant, then I can figure out how much I weigh. And that's all we do. We sit on this big plunger with the spring, we push a button, we sit there and bounce up and down, and then out pops our weight.
What was your favorite food, Bill?
Favorite food? taste changes up there. I talked about blood being pushed into your brain a little bit more. You get a sense of fullness. It affects your sinuses. And so I found that I liked spicier food because my sense of taste was more muted on orbit. Things like small differences in taste would get lost. So I had to go like full-on Tabasco sauce to try to get spice and taste something. But I also have a big sweet tooth. And so I would love like the chocolate pudding cake. You could heat that up and it was like 2,000 calories of warm, gooey goodness. Yes, ma'am.
With your 100,000, oh, thank you. With your 100,000 people team, how do you keep out, around the world, how do you keep out the politics?
We find, so the politics are there. There's a war in Ukraine right now. But a week ago I was having dinner with Alexei in Houston because he's there in training. And so we find a way to, it's not like we're finding a way, we naturally gravitate towards this really unifying idea of the exploration of space. And so you go around to all these different training centers, and I've spent weeks in training in Japan and Germany and months of training in Russia, and you go to all of these places, and I focused on the crew and the differences in the crew, but you get to hang out with all of the trainers, and you go to dinners with them and social activities, and you realize that they're as committed to this as anybody you've ever met. They're invested wholly. Their families are invested in this. They're committed to working together for the exploration and benefit of humanity. That's the million-dollar question. But the one thing we have to do is continue doing what we're doing. Because if we stop doing this, then what? And this is such a huge source of drawing people together for something so positive. We got to keep it. So when we go to the moon, it's going to be international. When we go to Mars, it's going to be international. If we don't have international crews, then there's something wrong with that. Okay, I feel like I've probably neglected a certain part of the room, and Mary Ellen's getting ready to give me the hook. In the middle, sir. Scott.
So, in the beginning, you talked about when you had to abort the first mission, and you talked about what you had to go through to mentally and to get ready to go up again. And I admire your intestinal fortitude to do that. But can you speak to how you managed the anxiety maybe of crawling back in that thing and going back up the second time?
Yeah. I didn't feel different the first time than the second time. Human spaceflight is about managing risk, and the way I manage that risk is I try to be prepared for the next worst failure, the next thing to go wrong. So as I'm launching into orbit, even when it goes flawlessly, I'm looking at all the different things that could go wrong, and I'm ready to act in case one of those things goes wrong. So I strap myself in knowing exactly what could happen and hoping it doesn't, but being prepared if it does. And so the mindset for me was not different the first time versus the second time. Where it is different is the family. Because I have all of that stuff to think about. I have all of those things that I can do, and I'm there because I know exactly what's going on because I'm living it. And my family, Katie was there the second time at the launch site, standing there, waiting. And by the time I suit up, I say goodbye to her for the last time. It's about 3 hours before I launch. So she says goodbye and then has to wait 3 hours to watch me launch into space. And you know the thoughts just kind of stir. It's super hard on the family. Or my mom and dad that are in mission control in Houston. It's super stressful on the family. The psych support team that we have, psychologists, psychiatrists, practitioners. There's a robust team there that helps us deal with this kind of stuff. And Doc Bacano was, we formed a bond through this process. And I said, hey, I'd like you to be in mission control. He's like, we're normally not there for launch viewings. It's a family thing. I said, I think you need to be in mission control, because Katie was the only one the second time around that went to Baikonur. Everybody else stayed and went to Houston. And after I landed, after the successful mission, and we're sitting in having a glass of wine in Houston and chatting about things, he's reflecting to me that his experience in watching that launch, he said, normally when people there's cheering and everybody's happy and there's, patting each other on the back and there's laughter and for the entire 8.5 minutes of us getting to orbit, and then once the engines cut off and they said we're safe in orbit, he's like, you could have heard a pin drop. Everybody was on pins and needles. And then there was just this collective exhale of, whew, we made it through. So it's super hard on the family. And today's Veterans Day, so I'm going to take 30 seconds, or probably more like 3 minutes. The same type of trauma is what we expose our military members when they deploy. We send them off. The military member, by and large, has a job to do and is focused and mission focused, and they're moving along and they're okay, and they're surrounded by a support network, but the families that stay at home don't know what's happening. They need the support. And then when members come back, we've got to help support them reintegrating into life together. We spend a lot of effort, and I've got a lot of experience trying to reintegrate, because Katie's done deployments and I've done deployments and we're experienced at this. We've got to do a great job and put a lot of effort in making sure that we support the whole person, and that's not just the service member, that's their family. On Veterans Day, we tend to thank the veterans for their service, but the families serve just as much as the member, and they sacrifice just as much as the member.
Okay, I watched this guy grow up. I love this guy. But I'm going to cut him off now because I am inviting you all to our library, and we have some refreshments there for you, and you continue to ask questions there. But on behalf of everyone that helped put this presentation and this whole day together, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to our committee. I want to say thank you to from the schools and all the citizens of everywhere, from Colorado, Kansas, and those who are online watching us. I want to say thank you for being here. This does conclude our presentation, and Nick, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.